Hello, everyone. Uh, a while ago, I made a video that went over all the Porcupine Tree records and how I felt about all of them, and that was really just a vehicle for the one joke where, I'm standing up yelling, I told you this would happen, something like that. I don't even remember the joke. I was wrong with a lot of those albums, I'm absolutely certain. I was rude for some reason. I haven't watched it, but I remember being obsessively harsh to some of them. Uh, so I'm gonna actually put effort into this one and give my actual opinions on Porcupine Tree, because I adore the band. I've listened to all the albums more than once, multiple to multiple times, in some cases, dozens of times, all the way through. And I'm going to rank them all from worst to best, and then I'm going to score them all from a score from 0 to 14. With that being said, I am only going to do the studio albums, so none of the EPs, none of the compilation albums, none of the live albums. So I'm sorry if that offends, if that upsets you at all. I do like some of my favorite Porcupine Tree songs are off of some of those albums. Uh, like Normal, oh, it goes so hard, it goes so hard. But I'm just gonna focus on the main 11. So, without further ado, let's get into the absolute worst Porcupine Tree record. Let's see if you can guess what it is. Yeah, it's on the Sunday of Life. So this album is really hard to rank because it is just so different from all the rest of them. It's a Steven Wilson solo project that was mostly a joke. It was a bunch of sounds that he kind of put together, and then the the label that signed him, I don't remember who exactly, was like, "Do you want to just put these in an album, like a double LP?" And he was like, "Oh, no, 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 no. Let's do a single, but let's condense some of the songs. Not all of them will go on there." Despite that, it's an hour and 15 minutes long, and this isn't like a fun hour and 15 minutes. There's a lot of songs that are just like they're jokes. I mean, that's what they are. So it's really interesting how different it is because there are some songs in here that do give a bit of like a sneak peek into what Porcupine Tree would eventually do. And there are some actually really good songs on there. As silly as it is, I really do like Jupiter Island. Nine Cats is of course the one that everyone knows from this album. The Nostalgia Factory is really good. Radioactive Toy. I really like Footprints and surprisingly Begonia Seduction Scene, and also the closer. It will rain for a million years. With that being said, there are songs where it's just noise, and noise rock is a thing, but this isn't the same. It's an interesting look into the beginnings of Porcupine Tree, but it's barely even Porcupine Tree at this point. So with that being said, I'm going to have to give it a rating of 6.7 out of 14. Could be worse, but it's below half, below 50%. It's it's worth a listen if you're a Porcupine Tree fan, but if you are a Porcupine Tree fan or if you're looking to get into Porcupine Tree, do not start with this album. I'll let you know what albums will be good to start off with, but this is not one of them. So let's go on to the second worst. All right, and next we have, yeah, it's The Sky Moves Sideways. It's honestly kind of good. If you're into the long form, like psychedelic rock, like if you like Pink Floyd, you're probably gonna like this album for the most part. There are some upbeat songs and there are some chill songs. There are also some long songs and then some songs that retread what other songs have done. And you can start to hear this is the third album that Porcupine Tree did, and this is a good album. No doubt in my mind. It's just not the best Porcupine Tree album. In fact, it's the second worst. Crazy, I know. Um, you can start to hear, the different solos and the different soundscapes, the beginning of the Porcupine Tree sound. But we're not there yet. But a lot of the songs are just extremely bloated. I'm gonna look through the let's see. Yeah, I mean, the Sky Moves Sideways, Phase 1, Dislocated Day, Stars Die is the most popular one off of that album. That one's good. That one's short and to the point. There's the Sky Moves Sideways, Phase 1 and 2, which is about a half, like 35, 40 minutes in total. And then you have the Sky Moves Sideways alternate version, which is just the same motifs, the same riffs, everything, but different. And it's 34 minutes and 43 seconds. That alone is around an hour of the same song. If you're into that kind of stuff, that's absolutely phenomenal. You will enjoy this album. However, I don't think this album has the best offering for Porcupine Tree. So, with that being said, I am going to give the album The Sky Moves Sideways an 8.25 out of 14. So, we've got one more that I consider kind of a stinker, but then we can kind of get onto the really good stuff. So, that being said, the third worst Porcupine Tree album is The Incident. I have almost a personal vendetta against this album because it took me like 5 tries to get through the album in its entirety. It's not super long. I think it's around an hour and 15, but it's not interesting to me, which is so frustrating to say because all the pieces are there. The idea behind the album that Steven Wilson had was humanizing different incidents, as the word incident is so distant from, it makes something seem so cold and uncaring. But I don't feel it as much in the album. And there's another one that feels like that we'll talk about in a second. But I mean the back half was far stronger in my opinion, and I think the added tracks at the end, like Black Dahlia, I think those are really good. And there are some standouts. I do like the song The Incident, and I do like Flicker, for example. And there is when I ran through all the albums once, I put Porcupine Tree on shuffle for a few days. Let some, kind of sift to the top. For some weird reason, Spotify was obsessed with giving me Great Expectations and Drawing the Line so many times. I got so annoyed by these songs. And now, I was already annoyed when I heard them the first time. Like Drawing the Line, I hate his vocal delivery. I hate Stephen Wilson's vocal delivery on that song. I don't know what it is, but it's the Drawing the Line. It's just, I don't like it. And that's just, there's always at least one thing I don't like about the album, which is so surprising for Porcupine Tree because it's almost always so consistent. So, The Incident was the only Porcupine Tree album that I was bored by. And like time flies, I was actively looking at how long was left until the end of this song because I just wasn't feeling it. And that's again, the pieces were there. I don't know why it's so low on my list. but I just really don't like this record as much. However, it still is, I think, more listenable than the first two. I think if you sat down and listened to an album, you would come out of The Incident much happier than you would coming out of The Sky Moves Sideways. So, I gave it a score of a 9 out of 14. We're starting to get into the more respectable range. I mean, it's definitely. I wouldn't recommend this album, especially not for your first Porcupine Tree album. But if you're already a Porcupine Tree fan and you like this album, I can completely see why. I mean, it's prog rock at its most, in my opinion. Okay, not its most. It's pretty pretentious. I mean, you look at Steven Wilson and you're like, yeah, I mean, come on. He's got to be at least a little pretentious, right? You don't get to wear that haircut without people giving you a couple glances like, that's, I don't know. The Incident, not my favorite record, but better than the last two. And after this point, these are albums that I would recommend you listen to, even if you're not a Porcupine Tree fan. If you want to try something new, I think all these albums are at least pretty good indication of what Porcupine Tree has to offer. And now number 8 is Stupid Dream. This one is really, I mean, it's when I first listened to this album, there's a funny story. I don't know why, but I kept thinking, oh, this sounds kind of like Radiohead, oddly enough. And in one of the songs, Pure Narcotic, it mentions The Bends by Radiohead, that that album. Uh, I don't know. I'm not sure if it's the instrumental, if it's even the vocals that remind me of Radiohead. It was just kind of the feel of it felt like early Radiohead. I mean, like Ben's era, maybe a tiny bit of OK Computer, you know? Um, let's see. As for standouts, I I really enjoy Slave Called Shiver. That's that's a really good song, and most of the other ones they're fine. They're perfectly fine. In fact, they're good songs, but they don't really stand out. Like if I think, oh, what are my favorite Porcupine Tree songs? None of the songs off of Stupid Dream are going to be up in the top 20 probably. Slave Called Shiver is probably the closest to that, and it's probably in the top 35. So it's not bad. But this is the other album that I was talking about with The Incident, where the concept doesn't really follow through into the album. Stephen Wilson said that it's written as an observation about how the artist becomes a businessman after the album or after an album comes out, and how that goes against the ideal of being a musician. You're basically selling yourself. You're selling your product when you think the product should be able to speak for itself. However, I didn't really feel that in this album, and that's kind of a nitpick. But as you'll see with some of the better albums on this list, it's Porcupine Tree has the distinct ability to make you feel what they want you to feel, and this one I feel like they kind of missed the mark. Uh, so I mean, it's a really easy listen for the most part, with the exception of like some odd parts, like the end of Even Less, which honestly, the first time I heard it, I thought I was like, it was like Sleeper Agent being activated or something like that. And the beginning of Tinto Brass is just a little strange, but I like those moments. They're endearing, even if they go a little long. But overall, the album is really good, but it's almost an outlier to me. Do I agree with that? I don't know. I don't know. As for the scoring, well, I'd give it a. There we go. I would give it a 10.2 out of 14. Overall, really, I mean, it is a really solid record, but there aren't too many standouts. So now, with that being said, Why isn't it pausing? Oh, good lord. It is time for number 7, which is I'm sure most people are surprised that it's gotten even this far, but it's Up the Downstair, Porcupine Tree's second studio album. And honestly, when I first started listening to Porcupine Tree, I found myself coming back to this album a lot more than I thought I would. Especially now, I'm surprised that I came back to this as much as I did. It's almost unplaceable what makes it so good to me. Um, each of the songs are like the album is split up into 4 different parts in most releases, which most of those parts, 3 of the 4 of those parts, are split up even further. Uh, the first part, I guess I'll call it, is what you were listening to, and that is really, really good. Oh my goodness. It's such a good start to the album. It gives you exactly what you should expect for the rest of the album, while still having something to say on its own. It's I mean, it is just great. As for the second song, Up the Downstairs, the title track, it's really good. I was trying to figure out why I liked it so much, and I think it is the fact that the main riff is very, very Porcupine Tree, and I mean like the the way that riff is written. I could see it on Closure Continuation easily. In fact, there's a song on Closure Continuation that I might almost compare it to in some ways. Uh, that being Rat's Return, I think. I think that's the one that has that part. But it's really interesting to see how early on Porcupine Tree was able to get their sound not solidified. It wasn't solidified yet. This album still has a lot of electronic instruments. I mean, the bass in this song is an electric, like it's an electronic bass. It's not an actual bass. At least I don't think. If it is, then I don't know how they did that. As for the rest of the album, not beautiful anymore. It's nice. It's the sounds are really good, but it's definitely not my favorite of the 4. And then Burning Sky. From the first 3 albums, this is the best song. It's this long, but not too long. It's this long piece, and it just goes all over the place. It is so good. It is psychedelic prog rock in almost peak form. It is just perfect with the sounds that it chooses. It's it's perfect in the way that it lets the moment breathe, which is something that Porcupine Tree does very well for the most part. And overall, I'd say this album is surprisingly humble, which that doesn't make much sense, but a lot of prog rock comes off as self-indulgent. This There are moments where I'm like, okay, did you really have to have that spoken word intro? But it doesn't feel like it's bashing you over the head with it, you know? It's just something a supplement, you know? And that's honestly what I'd call this album is just a supplement. It's by itself, it could be better, absolutely. But if you're doing something else while Burning Sky is playing, it enhances the experience tenfold. Oh, it's so good. With that being said, the score is going to be a 10.64 out of 14. So we're stepping it up now. We're getting to the better not yeah, the better albums. I mean, it's going to be a lot better from here on out. I think that the overall album, this is kind of a turning point for Porcupine Tree in this list, where the ones before, it's like, okay, yeah, if you like this album, I can understand. If it's your favorite, maybe I can understand. But from here on out, if it's your favorite and you have a reason to back it up, I'll believe you 100%. All these albums are amazing from here on out, and I had to nitpick a lot in my like decision making. And with that being said, I keep saying that. I think I've said that for every single transition. I don't need to say that. The next album is Lightbulb Sun. Now, Lightbulb Sun is kind of a story of two albums. The first half is very gentle. Um, I believe the official Porcupine Tree website describes it as a commercial first half and a more experimental second half. I don't remember where I got that. Honestly, I wrote the script a while ago, and this was one of the first albums I actually wrote down information for. So it could be from the Wikipedia page, for all I know. Uh, I think the acoustic guitars, I mean, they complement the sound very well. Some of the songs are really sweet sounding. The solos are given room to breathe, and I mean, it sounds great. The textures on the album in particular, I really like. However, the second half, it just knocks it out of the park. I think the first song that I really enjoy off of this is "Last Chance to Evacuate Planet Earth." It is from there on. I think it's, with the exception of one or two of those songs, it's a phenomenal record. Two of my top 10 Porcupine Tree songs might come from this album, those being Hate Song and Russia on Ice. And those two songs, oh my goodness! If if you're looking to see if Porcupine Tree is the right band for you, check out both of those songs. I think that gives a pretty good range of what different sounds you could expect from Porcupine Tree. And honestly, listen to this album. This album would be a great way to start off your Porcupine Tree journey. Your journey. Um, it's just so good. However, those first songs could be a bit more engaging. Well, not engaging. I think they could do a bit more. And in my opinion, I think the album sounds messy at some points. The production is a little messy. It's a little muddled. And that's not what I want from an album. So it does bring it down a little bit. But again, that's almost a nitpick, which I need to do from here on out. And so the score I would give it is let me get it out, and it is an 11.8 out of 14. Overall, great record. Really easy listening for the first half, and then it has some bite for the second half. So from here on out, actually, the next album, I'm also surprised made it up this high. So it is Signify. I love this album. I didn't think I would like this album as much as I did, but when I was ranking them, I was like, oh, I can't put Signify below Lightbulb Sun. I can't. I listened to this album, I think, for an entire day, just on repeat. And remember what I said during Up Downstairs, where I was like, it feels kind of humble? This doesn't. This one is kind of, it does kind of the same thing where it has a like spoken word thing that kind of has a through line throughout the entire album. But the songs in here, big step up. Now we're getting to ones where it's like most of the songs are on a playlist somewhere in my Spotify. Like Sleep with No Dreaming. Oh my goodness. Such an underrated song. I love Sever. I love Intermediate Jesus and everything about Dark Matter. But as with a lot of prog rock albums, there's a lot of filler. I understand it sets a mood, it sets an atmosphere, but sometimes it's just way too long. Like Light Mass Prayers is 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes long. It's moments like that where I really want to give it an even higher score because I mean, Signify, banger. I mean, it's just banger after banger after banger. Waiting is great. I love the like hand drumming. Um, but it's just a little bloated, which is very frustrating. So, as a score, I would give it a 12.1 out of 14. It's what it does right, it does extremely right, and what it does wrong, it does wrong. Doesn't do it extremely wrong, which is good. Doesn't ruin the album by any means. I mean, you could always just skip that song. That 4.5 minute song that's just, the same three notes in like a pad. You could just skip that. You're not missing a whole lot. And overall, I mean, the album is very solid overall. And so I really do like this album. And that's why it's surprisingly my fifth most favorite Porcupine Tree album. I thought it was going to be like number 8 or something like that. But as I was looking, I was like, I cannot put Up the Downstairs above it. I cannot put Lightbulb Sun above it. Just because I enjoyed the album so thoroughly. And again, I don't think that that's a very common opinion, so I hope that I explained it well enough. But I I like this album. What can I say? Uh, Number 4, In Absentia. This album is phenomenal. This is the first album with Gavin Harrison, and you can feel his presence. I mean, he is one of the best drummers I think ever. And I stand by that. I mean, if you watch, there are some songs that he goes so unbelievably hard on, and this album just it's a tour de force of instrumentation, of experimentation, of even Stephen Wilson's vocals. I think don't really come to the peak. I think the next three albums actually have better vocals from Stephen Wilson than this album. But this one has some really, really good stuff on here. Uh, this album is also really interesting. This is what I was talking about earlier, where like Stupid Dream had a concept that I didn't really feel was executed very well. This one, oh boy, I think it nails what it wants to do. It's In absentia is typically used. It's a term used in the court of law for when a person is mentally unable to be represented. And Stephen Wilson has said that this album is about people on the fringes, on the edges of humanity and society. So a lot of the songs have connections to serial killers or the loss of innocence or death, and you hear it. I mean, there are some songs that I absolutely adore that, I mean, you can just tell something is wrong. I mean, the first song, Blackest Eyes, there's a lyric that just straight out says, "It's so erotic when your makeup runs." It's like, oh my goodness. And I think this album has the heaviest songs. It's the most rock oriented album, I would definitely say. And it's really freaking good. There aren't any songs on here that I dislike, and I actually did do the remastered or the remastered version, the deluxe version. I'm not including any of the demos in this or the radio edits, but songs like Drown With Me, Orchidea, Chloroform Futile, and Meantime, they're all really good songs. And my personal favorite, maybe off of this entire album, is Drown With Me. So good. But like Trains, that one's weird because, and this is my big complaint about this album, is it's really inconsistent with the tone. It'll go from Blackest Eyes, which is has a massive riff. It's then it just goes into Trains, which is a really really sweet song about like nostalgia, and that's where it's like kind of the loss of innocence, I guess. But you don't feel it. It's just I love the song Trains. It is such a good song, but it doesn't really fit in with what the album is kind of going for. But then again, I feel like maybe then you have songs like Dot 3 where that's a super atmospheric. Oh, it's so good. And that bass line like Strip the Soul and Dot 3, such good instrumentation. But it does feel a little like you get one or the other. Well, actually, you get both in some songs too, because there are some softer sections again in the opening track, Blackest Eyes, where it's just all over the place. And in some ways that's amazing. I actually kind of like that about this album, but it's also to its detriment because when you get to albums that I adore like this, you have to find issues with it. And I don't like doing that, but I have to. This is the fourth best one, too. Which is crazy. A lot of people have this as their number one, and I completely understand why. Everything just kind of comes together, and I think this is the album where Porcupine Tree was fully solid. This is where they hit their stride, and they are doing their best for the next few albums, with the exception of The Incident. So for the scoring, I will give it a 9.05 out of 10. Closure Continuation. This is my third favorite Porcupine Tree album, and it's their most recent one. This is the album I first listened to when someone told me I should listen to Porcupine Tree. I just, yes, sure, I'll do their most recent album. And I heard Harridan, and I instantly fell in love. Now, most of Porcupine Tree does not sound like that, but it does definitely feel like Porcupine Tree, and that makes no sense. And that's kind of what I was talking about all the way back in Up the Downstair, where it was, there are some riffs in here that sound like they could come off of Closure Continuation. No matter how heavy they get or how soft they get, they always have a certain feel, with some very few exceptions, and a lot of those being off of The Incident, unfortunately. Porcupine Tree has a very specific feel. And I think this album encapsulates that because you have songs like Rat's Return and Population 3 that kind of go in. And then you have Dignity or Of the New Day and you're like, okay, so they can do both. But this one isn't going for anything in particular. So while I think In Absentia suffers from being inconsistent, I don't think Closure Continuation has that issue. Unfortunately, this album did lose Colin Edwin. He was honestly my favorite part about the live shows just because he always had that smile. It was so fun. And his bass lines went so hard. I mean, again, Hate Song, that's one of my favorite bass lines of all time. Both parts. uh, so instead, Steven Wilson's playing bass. And while it's different, it's so good. It's so good. It's it hurts that Colin Edwin isn't there anymore, but also Steven Wilson knows what he's doing. Uh, the album as a whole is so polished. It's just so clean all the way through, and you can both tell and not tell that it was written over like 13 years. For one, it feels like everything was meticulously thought out and planned, even though it kind of wasn't. They were just kind of recording songs over 13 years, and they're like, "Yeah, this is what we're gonna put on there." But they're, I don't know, it's just really good. I'm trying to figure out if there's anything I don't like about it. I mean, there are a couple songs. Dignity and Never Have weren't my favorites, but everything else, it's tight, it's interesting, and it doesn't overstay its welcome, which is something I was worried about when I listened to the album and then I went all the way back to the beginning. And then when I heard The Incident, I was like, oh no, am I misremembering Closure Continuation? Does it suck? No, it doesn't. It's amazing. I think it's an excellent return to form, and I really hope that they return with more and that they continue down this line because it is just Porcupine Tree, just again banger after banger. And I'm not just saying that the hard songs, like the heavier songs, are just bangers. I think the softer songs they have some just talking about the in absentia, actually, I meant to mention that there's a song, "Heart Attack and a Lay-By," that is just it kind of hits you. It kind of hits you, where it's like, yeah, this person is dying, and it's almost like you're listening to someone's final moments, and that's so good. And I think that they do something similar to that here with Chimera's Wreck, where it's not someone's final moments or anything like that, but it's really it does fit the exact tone of the lyrics, and that's something that Steven Wilson, his lyrics aren't my favorite in a lot of cases, but I think on this album they're a lot better than in some other records. So, yeah, 12.7 out of 14. I didn't give any fanfare this time, sorry. I'm sure 35 minutes into this video, you're more than tired of these, pause, and then. But this is just a phenomenal record. And if you are looking for another, this is a really good one to step into as well because it has a lot of those different sounds. So, yeah, yeah. This is my third favorite Porcupine Tree record. So now, number two is Deadwing. Oh, Deadwing is so good. My favorite part about this album is how consistent it is. There isn't a stinker on here. It's every single song is really good. And they have Porcupine Tree brings in some guests. There's Adrian Belew of King Crimson fame, who has solos on both Deadwing and Halo, and you have Michael Felt, excuse me, I still don't know how to pronounce his name, from Opeth, doing backing vocals for a lot of the album, and does the second solo on Arriving, Somewhere But Not Here. And what an album this is! I mean, there are some short, punchy ones like Halo, Shallow, and Open Car, but then you have just the grandiose, the opening track, Deadwing, and then going into Lazarus, and you've got, well, I think it goes Deadwing, Shallow, Lazarus. Excellent first three. But my favorite ones are Lazarus, Halo, Arriving Somewhere But Not Here, Mellotron Scratch, and I'll include The Start of Something Beautiful in there. That's almost all the album that I just mentioned there. And every single song, like Glass Arm Shattering, amazing song, amazing closer. It's just it's so close to the pinnacle of Porcupine Tree, and it's based on a screenplay written by Wilson and by Mike Bennion. It was originally going to be actually they reopened it in 2019 to see if they could get it funded, but it's a ghost story, and it's really interesting. It's genuinely really interesting. It's one of those prog albums where you hear the story and it doesn't feel forced, you know? There are some albums, I'm not naming any names, but I'm definitely naming names. I think like Pink Floyd's The Final Cut, it's so bad. It pushes that story so hard that the music takes a hit. This one, it strikes a perfect balance between amazing music and a great story. And that is just, it's almost the pinnacle of Porcupine Tree. It's so close. And based on that, I have to give it a score of 12.9 out of 14. I think the guest the guest appearances from both of those are just spot on. I really struggled between this one and number one. But the mixing is incredible, the sounds are all incredible, the songs are all incredible, the flow is incredible. This album is incredible. Truly one of the best prog albums of all time. I mean that, and it's number two. So yeah, with that being said, number one, drum roll please, you all know what it is. You all know what it is. It's Fear of a Blank Planet. And, actually, it is the only Porcupine Tree album so far that I have on vinyl. I adore this album. This is in my top 5 albums of all time. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't written that list out. I've never thought too hard about it. Uh, every single song on here is pitch perfect. Sentimental and My Ashes aren't my favorite on the album, but if you took those out, the album suffers greatly. It's it's one of those albums where it's only 6 songs. It's only 6 songs. One of them is 18 minutes long, which we'll get to that. Don't worry. But it's just so amazing. And this one is based heavily off of Easton Ellis, his book Lunar Park. Which, if you don't recognize the name Bret Easton Ellis, he also did like American Psycho. That's that guy. Yeah. It deals with how kids are growing up in this new age of technology, and some of the things are prophetic. And the one downside to this album is that some of the lyrics have aged pretty poorly. And that's not really its fault. It talks about malls, which they barely exist anymore. This was in 2007. So it's like, can I really fault the album? Yes, I can. It's not as timeless as Deadwing, I would say, but I think its peaks are higher. I think, I mean, the album, I got on a little bit of a tangent, but the album deals with kids growing up in this new age and how they're developing things like bipolar and ADD, other behaviors and coping mechanisms. There's one, I think it's in Fear of a Blank Planet, where he says Xbox is a god to me, and it's like, okay, that's kind of cheesy. So I kind of want to take that away from it, but it's also like, yeah, I mean, honestly, kids were doing a lot of video games, and they still are. Now, is that really a bad thing? I don't know. I don't know. It does feel like there's a bit of juvenoia in this record, but as a whole, every single thing other than that is just pitch perfect. Way Out of Here is, oh, it gives me chills every single time. Fear of a Blank Planet just, again, chills every single time. Oh, Alex Lifeson from Rush does a solo on Anesthetize. Robert Fripp of King Crimson does the soundscapes for Way Out of Here. This album is just, from front to back, I think, absolutely the best Porcupine Tree record and one of the best prog albums of all time. And while we're on the topic, Anesthetize. That is a monster of a song. Uh, it goes up and down and sideways, but every single step of the way, you are fully engaged. You are sitting there just, good lord, they're doing that? Oh my goodness. And the end just has you leaning back like, oh, that just happened. There aren't a whole lot of songs that do that to me, but Anesthetize is one of those. And, oh, I'm gonna say the most cliche thing. It's an experience. It's not a song. I hate when people say that. I hate when people say that. But really, this Anesthetize, it is just a monster of a song. It's dark, it's moody, it's gritty, but it has its moments where it steps back and it gives you a second to breathe while also giving something to chew on. So, yeah, it's not perfect, but it's as close as perfect can get with Porcupine Tree. For that reason, I would give it a 13.5 out of 14. So, yippee! That's all of Porcupine Tree's albums. This video is so long, and it's just me talking. If anyone watches this, I will be shocked. If you made it this far, nice. And thank you. But yeah, no, this album is just pitch perfect in every way. Um, Well, almost every way. I gave my grievances. So yeah, that's all the albums. Hang on, let me get the all the scores. Yeah, these are all the scores in case you wanted to get a refresher. And yes, I am aware of the discrepancy. I don't really care all that much. So yeah, this is that's the video. Wahoo! Uh Again, thank you so much for watching if you did end up watching the whole thing. I'm very, very new to this whole video thing. I don't even know how to edit yet. So I'm in OBS pressing pause on the recording and then changing the image and the score and then using the slider that goes from preview to program or whatever it is. And so I know nothing about the craft. I'm learning. This is better than my last few videos, that's for dang sure. And if you do end up watching this, let me know what you want to see. I'm probably going to do something like this for the Mars Volta, which I'm actually wearing the Mars Volta shirt right now. They're my favorite band of all time. But I had this one in the works for a while. And yeah, well, again, I really appreciate you sticking it out to the end. None of the other videos on my channel are like this. So if you like this, you're going to have to wait. The rest of them are like weird videos I did for school projects, or it's like a weird gaming video. One of them, I like eat allergy medicine. And then there's I posted like a speed run yesterday. I don't know. It's just so bizarre what I do with this channel. So yeah, if there's anything you want me to do, I'll probably do it. Just let me know. Again, thanks for sticking it out to the end. Hooray. Yeah, let me know what you think too. I'm sure you disagree with most of my picks. But yeah, just what's your favorite? What's your least favorite? How high would you put Signify? Answer those three questions in the comments. Thank you, and goodbye.